Joseph Ferlazzo, 41, and Emily Jean Swartz, 22, seemed like your average newlywed couple. They had tied the knot just a year earlier after a whirlwind romance and were ready to mark the occasion with a getaway to Bolton, Vermont in October 2021. Joseph and Emily had had a rough time. It was the end of the pandemic, and the pair had spent most of the last year living on Emily's mother's property in Northfield, New Hampshire. They'd previously lived in Vermont, but as COVID ravaged the globe, Joseph had a hard time finding work as a tattoo artist and body piercer. Emily, a nursing assistant, was on the front lines and basically became the sole breadwinner. The couple had had a chance to finally get away and go back to Vermont, hopefully to begin the life they had always dreamed about. It was also a chance for Emily to finally meet Joseph's sister Nicole. Despite the fact that Emily and Joseph had been married for a year, she hadn't met his family. The pair packed up their converted bus, a cozy little home on wheels they'd fixed up, and hit the road. On Friday, October 15th, she and Joseph rolled into town and parked at a condo complex called Barron around 7:20 p.m. Joseph's sister Nicole and her boyfriend were renting an Airbnb nearby, and the plan was to meet up with them to watch some Netflix. But something was off right from the start. Joseph and Emily only hung out with Nicole for about 15 minutes in the parking lot before heading back to their camper van. Emily sent her last Facebook message to family at 8:13 p.m. By 9:39 p.m., Joseph was texting his sister that they were going to take the night to rest instead of coming over. What happened next in that camper van is the stuff of nightmares. You see, Emily never made it out of the camper alive. Throughout the evening, the couple had argued relentlessly. Emily, having had enough of the back and forth, decided to go lie down. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Emily was dead, her body parts scattered around the camper. Rather than calling 911 or showing an ounce of remorse, Joseph immediately set about covering up his crime. He put a Market Basket shopping bag over Emily's head and tied a garbage bag around her neck. Using his 200-pound frame, he then hauled her 130-pound body into the camper's shower stall. And next came the cleanup. Joseph bagged up the bloody pillows, sheets, and other evidence. He gathered Emily's shoes, glasses, wallet, and phone, though he made sure to keep her ID. Then he remade the bed with fresh linens as if nothing happened. And within hours, he was texting his sister again at 7:48 a.m. asking about breakfast plans, acting like it was just another normal day. Over breakfast at a place called Max's, Joseph casually ate eggs and sipped a mimosa while his wife's corpse lay cooling in the camper shower. He then drove the van to St. Albans and parked it at his friend's property, lying that Emily had taken off after an argument. As if to cover his tracks, Joseph sent a text to Emily's phone saying, "Whatever, I'm gonna spend time with Nikki while I can. Call me." He then spent the entire evening having drinks at a gastropub called Twigs before returning to the van to sleep alongside Emily's body. But Joseph wasn't done violating Emily's body. At some point over the next 2 days, he made the depraved decision to dismember her corpse to make it easier to carry. Using a serrated saw, he hacked off her arms, legs, feet, and head. Her torso was riddled with wounds. Joseph had used at least 3 different knives when he then bagged up each body part separately in garbage bags. And on Monday, Joseph drove back to New Hampshire, leaving the camper, Remington the dog, and Emily's remains behind. Back in New Hampshire, Joseph arrived on his motorcycle without Emily. But Adrienne Bass, Emily's mother, immediately knew something was wrong. When she asked Joseph where her daughter was, Joseph told her that the pair had argued on Friday evening just outside Bolton. The fact was, her daughter was missing, and her own husband had no idea and not much concern as to where she was. Adrienne and her husband immediately called the police and filed a missing persons report. There's not a whole lot of information on Joseph's early life other than he was born in Pennsylvania and moved around quite a lot. Perhaps one of the most interesting aspects of his childhood has to do with his parents, or rather his stepmother. See, Emily's death wasn't the family's first brush with murder. In October 2009, Joseph's stepmother, Young Hee Lim Ferlazzo, was found to death in her home. Her husband, Joseph Sr., had found her after returning from a late-night shopping trip. Young Hee Lim was the manager of a massage parlor owned by Joseph Sr., which had actually been raided sometime before her murder. As for Joseph and Emily, they had met in Vermont in 2018. At the time, Joseph was working a steady job as a tattoo artist. He even had an apprentice named Lauren. Lauren was training to become a body piercer, but she lacked what was needed most: a steady hand. There was no way she was ready for real clients, so Joseph encouraged her to practice with her friends and family. And so one day, Lauren brought in her friend Emily to get a piercing. It went well, and the trio made small talk while the procedure was underway. Afterwards, once the tension was gone and they could all relax, Joseph and Emily began chatting. Joseph noticed that Emily was incredibly flirty, even though she was in a relationship. When Emily left that afternoon, Joseph leaned over to Lauren and reportedly said, quote, "I wouldn't mind making her my next ex-wife," unquote. Yes, Joseph had been married before. In fact, he was quite the ladies' man and didn't seem to stick to the ethics that some tattoo artists have of not getting involved with his clients. It almost seemed like he preferred his partners to be his clients, which already suggests an interesting power dynamic. After their first meeting, Joseph and Emily didn't reconnect again until 2020. Joseph had moved to Maine and then back to Vermont, where he'd called Lauren up and asked her if she wanted to hang out. He was couch surfing at the time and wasn't really working. And Lauren was more than happy to meet up and even suggested that he tattoo her and her friend. And of course, that friend was Emily. Joseph followed through and tattooed Emily, and it was roughly 2 weeks after that this pair began messaging, initially with the idea of doing a new tattoo. I mean, Emily was single at this point, and that flirtatious nature she'd had when she and Joseph had first met once again reared its head. Joseph was intrigued and asked her if she wanted to go for a motorcycle ride to see the sights, and Emily agreed. And by the time evening came around, the pair were officially dating. There was a 19-year age gap between the two, and the couple's friends definitely had some reservations about it, but that didn't seem to matter to the pair. In August of that year, the couple moved in together, and a few months after this, the pair became engaged, reportedly after Emily asked Joseph if he would marry her. 1 month after this, they were hitched. But there was one issue of contention that the new couple hadn't quite worked out yet. Joseph was polyamorous, and Emily wanted monogamy. To compromise, Joseph agreed to monogamy with a polyamorous clause. When the monogamous streak ran out for him, the pair would be polyamorous. Unsurprisingly, Joseph became bored of the one-woman lifestyle within a couple of months, and that's when the arguments began. The pair were already stressed, low on funds, and living in cramped quarters. To add to this, their attachment styles were wildly different. Joseph saw no issue with messaging clients and random strangers via social media trying to connect and hook up. And for Emily, this was just too much for her to bear. Maybe she thought that marriage would change Joseph, that he'd finally settle down. But whatever her hopes were, they never materialized. Instead, the relationship devolved into a nightmare. And though Emily's friends and family suspected things were bad, they had no idea of what was coming. And now, Emily was missing, and the only person who had seen her last wasn't talking. After Adrian and David Bass had reported Emily missing, the local police tried to get a hold of Joseph to hear his version of events. They ended up managing to connect with him via a call, and Joseph repeated what he had told Adrian. Emily was last seen walking down Route 2, waiting for an Uber to take her back to New Hampshire. One of the factors that Adrian found suspicious about this was how happy Emily had been before the trip. It didn't seem likely that there could have been an argument so bad that she would want to abruptly leave before the trip had even begun. What could have prompted such a dramatic reaction? Meanwhile, Joseph was already on his way to Vermont in his Jeep Wrangler heading to a friend's house. The house was located in Meadowbrook Lane, and Joseph had conveniently left the camper just outside. Once he arrived, he entered the camper to spend the night, but he was by no means sleeping. Instead, he was working meticulously for hours on end dismembering Emily's body. The plan was to cut her into pieces small enough to transport her to the woods and bury her, with the hope that no one would ever find her remains. But things didn't exactly go according to plan. The next morning, Joseph went to the local Maple Fields, a convenience store. He was aware the police were looking for him, but he didn't know the extent to which the report had spread. It had hit the news, and a server at Maxie's, where he had had breakfast with Nicole, had reported seeing him to the police.
The dirt road is empty. The brush is silent. A man stumbles backward into the driver's seat, trying to pull the door shut as blood spreads across his shirt. And the people who lured him here aren't panicking. They're finishing what they came to do. It looks like a roadside emergency, a car broken down in a remote area. But investigators would later discover this was a staged moment, executed in the middle of nowhere, and the person closest to him that day wasn't just a witness. She was part of the plan. In this episode, we reconstruct one of the most disturbing international murder-for-hire cases involving an American family overseas, the killing of missionary Bo Schroyer in Angola, and the conviction of his wife, Jackie Schroyer. Because what happened on that dirt road outside Lubango didn't just destroy a family. It exposed a conspiracy that investigators say was built on secrecy, money, and an affair hidden behind missionary work. To understand how this case unfolded, you have to start with Bo Schroyer, who he was, and what brought him to Angola. Bo Schroyer was 44 years old. He was originally from Minnesota, and before becoming a missionary, he served as a police officer in Detroit Lakes. In the United States, Bo lived the kind of life people associate with stability: church involvement, family structure, community presence. He married Jackie Hawkinson on May 6, 2005, in Andover, Minnesota. Together, they had 5 children. At some point, Bo's interest in mission work expanded beyond the United States. According to his obituary, his heart for missionary work grew after a mission trip to Africa with his oldest daughter. Eventually, Bo and Jackie committed to living overseas full-time. By 2021, the Schroyer family had moved to Angola, Africa through an evangelical organization called SIM USA, based in North Carolina. Their work focused on outreach and support for marginalized communities. In public posts, Bo described their environment as extremely remote. No electricity, no sewer system, no reliable water infrastructure, a difficult setting, physically and logistically, where daily survival required planning. But the family appeared to be committed to the mission, at least publicly. Then came October 24th, 2024. Bo Schroyer posts on Facebook. It's a message that would later take on a chilling weight, because it's one of the last public traces of his mindset before his final day. He writes about the Nyaneka people. He calls them among the most marginalized people groups in Angola. He describes their living conditions and their need for support. The tone is consistent with missionary outreach, just mission work, like any other day. But within 24 hours, Bo would be gone. October 25th, 2024. Bo and Jackie Schroyer are traveling near Lubango in southern Angola. Lubango is the capital of Huila province, and while it is one of the larger cities in the region, many surrounding areas quickly transition into isolated rural terrain. The roads are not like highways in the United States. Many stretches are dirt. Many areas are sparsely populated. Cell reception can be unreliable. Visibility can be limited by landscape and brush. And that was perfect for the plan that would soon unfold. At some point during their travel, Bo and Jackie encounter several local men. According to Angolan investigators, these men had criminal histories involving serious offenses, including kidnapping and armed robbery. But Bo and Jackie did not know that. Or if they did, it was not reflected in any public information. The men claim they are having problems with their vehicle. It's the kind of situation that seems plausible in rural Angola. A broken car on a remote road isn't unusual. A stranded group needing help isn't unusual either. And Bo, by all accounts, was the kind of person who would stop. He pulls over. He steps out of his vehicle. And this is the moment where the timeline begins to narrow into something investigators later described as structured and staged. Jackie is with him. She is not far away. But she later tells authorities she needed to go to the bathroom. She says she walked into the bushes, and while she is away, Bo is lured further from the car, further into isolation. And within moments, the staged roadside emergency becomes something else entirely, because Bo Schroyer is attacked. Later, when police arrive and examine the scene, they find Bo Schroyer in his vehicle. He has been stabbed repeatedly. His injuries are extensive enough that authorities describe the killing as brutal. The interior of the vehicle is blood-stained. His belongings are still present. There is no obvious theft. There is no sign that the primary purpose was robbery. Instead, the evidence suggests the purpose was the act itself. And in a case like this, investigators immediately ask a basic question. If this wasn't robbery, then why was he targeted? The scene suggested a fast execution that ended at the vehicle. A struggle occurred. The blood inside the vehicle indicates close-range violence. It suggests that Bo was attacked either inside the vehicle or forced back into it after being stabbed outside. Investigators also find something extremely important at the scene: a knife that's American-made. That detail becomes one of the earliest pieces of evidence that turns the case from possible random roadside violence into something planned. An American-made knife is not a common local item in rural Angola. It immediately raises the possibility that someone connected to the victim or connected to American goods was involved. And so, with this information in mind, police turn to Bo's wife. When Jackie is questioned, police observe her demeanor closely. They do not publicly describe every detail of her statements, but later, during sentencing, the judge explicitly comments on her behavior. The judge states that Jackie showed little interest in investigating who killed her husband. That lack of urgency is described as unusual, especially given her position as the spouse. This is not framed as emotional commentary. It's framed as behavioral evidence. Because in homicide investigations, investigators pay attention to immediate reaction patterns. They look for urgency, desperation, and consistency. And what they saw from Jackie reportedly raised suspicion. Authorities initially note that she appeared distraught, but their later actions make it clear they did not accept her behavior as natural or convincing. Within days, Jackie becomes a suspect. Jackie Schroyer is arrested only days after Bo is killed. That speed matters. It suggests that investigators uncovered something quickly enough to justify detaining her before she could leave the country or reorganize her story. The arrest happens in November 2024, shortly after the killing. By February 2025, she is formally charged. But in the background, Angolan investigators are already building the conspiracy structure. Because they aren't just investigating a killing, they're investigating coordination. Investigators identify a young man connected to the Schroyer family home. His name is Bernardino Elias, age 24. He worked as the family's security guard in Angola. In the Schroyer household, he would have had access. He would have known routines, schedules, and, more importantly, he would have known where Bo traveled and how. And according to investigators, he was not just a guard. He was Jackie's lover. Authorities describe strong suspicions of a romantic relationship between Jackie and Elias. And in court, the relationship becomes a key part of the motive. Because if Jackie were involved in an affair, Bo would become the obstacle. A husband is not easy to remove from a family situation, but a husband can be removed permanently through violence. And that is the theory prosecutors build. Authorities claimed Jackie had given the American-made knife found at the scene as a gift to Bernardino Elias. That detail is devastating for her defense because it ties her directly to the weapon, not in a vague way, not in an indirect way. It implies she placed the weapon into the hands of a co-conspirator who was present in her life. A co-conspirator who was allegedly sleeping with her. And in cases like this, a weapon origin is not just physical evidence, but narrative evidence. It tells investigators that this murder was not local violence. It was an act connected to the victim's personal circle. Investigators then uncover another key detail. Days before Bo was killed, Jackie and Elias traveled to the remote location where the murder occurred. This is not framed as a coincidence. Authorities present it as preparation, scouting the site, choosing the location, and testing how remote it was. This single detail destroys the possibility of a spontaneous roadside attack, because if Jackie visited the exact location days earlier, then she would have known what would happen there. And if that's true, then Bo Schroyer didn't stop to help strangers on October 25th. He stopped at the final location that had already been chosen for him. And the plan didn't begin on the road. It began inside his own home.
From grieving wife to murder suspect. From loving mother to monster. This is the chilling story of Corey Richens, the wife who allegedly killed her own husband and then went on to write a book for children, teaching them about dealing with loss. On March 4th, 2022, 39-year-old Eric Richens was found dead in his bedroom after drinking a cocktail prepared by his wife, Corey. Eric had sipped on a Moscow Mule, a popular drink containing ginger beer and lime juice. Only this edition of the classic cocktail reportedly also contained 5 times the legal dose of After gifting her husband the drink to celebrate Corey's closing of a business deal, Corey went to sleep in the bedroom of one of the couple's 3 children. She awoke to find Eric dead and called 911. When questioned, Corey Richins claimed to have performed CPR on her husband once discovering him cold to the touch, though investigators found this questionable due to the large amounts of blood still present in Eric's mouth. In another suspicious statement, Corey shared that she had kept her phone plugged in to charge overnight in the couple's bedroom, yet investigators found that the phone had been moved several times during the night and that the screen had been unlocked multiple times before Corey made her call to 911. The circumstances around Eric Richins' death were undoubtedly suspicious, and Corey was a suspect. Though it would be over a year before any arrests would be made, Corey Richins would spend the next 12 months committing shocking act after shocking act, and as a result, further digging herself into a hole. 2 days after Eric's death, Corey Richins hired a locksmith to drill into her husband's safe. She was hoping to get her hands on the cash amount of over $100,000, but Eric's sister, Katie Richins Benson, interfered and demanded Corey leave the safe untouched. This reasonable request was followed by Corey attacking her sister-in-law. The widow reportedly punched Katie Richins Benson in the face and neck. After this incident, Richins Benson hired a private investigator to keep an eye on Corey. This fallout put a shocking spotlight on Corey's apparent desire to get at Eric's money, yet a look back to earlier days in their 9-year relationship renders this somewhat unsurprising. At some point between 2015 and 17, Corey Richins, without Eric's knowledge, purchased 4 life insurance policies on her husband. These totaled to the amount of almost $2 million. In late 2020, Corey Richins reportedly obtained and then spent a $250,000 home equity line of credit. She also withdrew around $100,000 from Eric's bank accounts and spent approximately $30,000 using Eric's credit cards. This was all done without Eric's knowledge. When Corey was finally confronted by her husband about her wallet-draining antics, she agreed to pay Eric Richins back. Eric was not convinced. 1 month later, the father of 3 consulted with a divorce lawyer. Eric was already looking for a way out, and just in case the unthinkable happened, Eric Richins changed his will. He formed a living trust and placed it in control of his sister, Katie. Corey Richins was now shut out in the cold, but she wasn't going to take this defeat lying down. In January of 2022, Corey made herself the beneficiary on Eric's life insurance. Once Eric was made aware of this change, he quickly reverted it back. Corey then filed for a new $100,000 life insurance policy for Eric Richins. Her application was unsuccessful. By the time of Eric Richins' death, Corey had allegedly amassed a debt of around $1.8 million. With Corey's financial troubles and her repeated attempts to fiddle her husband's funds, it seems almost clear that Corey Richins' motive to kill was money. But if that's the case, was there ever any reason for Eric Richins to suspect that his wife would do something so heinous in order to take control of his wealth? The tragic answer is yes. Valentine's Day 2022, Corey Richins makes her husband a sandwich, then places it in his truck accompanied by a romantic note expressing her love. It's the day when so many couples take the time to show their appreciation and affection for each other. Yet Corey Richins is using this day as something completely different. Eric eats what he believes to be a lovingly prepared meal. He only consumes 1 bite before he breaks out in hives and has tremendous difficulty breathing. Eric becomes so ill, he has to use his son's EpiPen. This incident was reportedly the first time that Corey Richins attempted to do her husband physical harm. Eric Richins believed his wife had tried to poison him. He told a friend this much. The sinister sandwich should have been the final call for Eric Richins to leave his wife and get himself to safety because Corey was allegedly already planning her next attempt on his life. 2 days prior to feeding her husband a poisonous lunch, Corey Richins is reported to have contacted an acquaintance and asked for After the sandwich failed to end Eric's life, Corey is said to have reached out to the same acquaintance, but this time to ask for something stronger. Weeks later, Eric Richins was lying lifeless on his bedroom floor with a fatal dose of in his system. Corey Richins' alleged actions mentioned up to this point have ranged from disturbing to downright evil. But what Corey did 12 months after her husband's death almost defies belief. March of 2023 marked the 1-year anniversary of Eric Richins' death. Corey Richins seemingly saw the date as the perfect time to channel hers and her children's emotions surrounding Eric's passing, and author her own book teaching young children how to deal with grief. Corey dedicated her 41-page book, Are You With Me?, to her amazing husband and father. She sold the book on Amazon and even went on Salt Lake City radio to promote it. Her reasoning for penning the book was undeniably bizarre, given the circumstances of Eric's death. Yet Corey held nothing back when opening up about her decision to release Are You With Me? I went on Amazon and Barnes & Noble to try to find something to help us cope at night. Nights are the hardest. I just wanted some story to read to my kids at night, and I couldn't find anything that suited them, so I was like, let's just write one. Corey Richins. This story got even weirder once the radio station learned that Corey was in fact a suspect in her husband's murder. The book was removed from sale, and the radio station apologized, stating they were not previously aware of the situation. 1 month after Corey's radio appearance, she was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and 3 counts of possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. Court documents have revealed even more evidence that paint Corey as the true villain in this story. Corey Richins' internet history contained the following searches. What is a lethal dose of luxury prisons for the rich in America? Death certificate says pending. Will life insurance still pay? Can cops force you to do lie detector test? How to permanently delete information from an iPhone? Corey's defense lawyers do have an explanation for these curious questions. However, they claim these searches were made as part of Corey simply researching her own case and are not evidence of her guilt. Despite the charges and a seemingly overwhelming amount of evidence, Corey Richins maintains her innocence. She has claimed that Eric's reaction after eating the sandwich on Valentine's Day was due to allergies, and that he had been struggling with an addiction to pain medication prior to his death. She has also shared her belief that Eric was having an affair with a work colleague. It has been over a year since Eric's untimely death. His family are still seeking justice, whereas Corey is keen to move on with her life. I just want this over. I just want our lives back and to move on and grieve and mourn my husband without looking over my shoulder constantly for you guys, or the private investigator or the Richins family, Corey Richins. The latest development in Corey's outrageous story is that on June 9th, 2023, Corey filed a lawsuit against Eric Richins' estate, seeking half the equity in the couple's $1.9 million home. Even after her arrest, and even though she is facing a murder charge, Corey Richins is still fighting for the money she believes she is owed. This tale may present itself as a cautionary one advising against the evils of money, though the reality is that if Corey Richins did in fact murder her husband, money, no matter how much, is no worthy excuse for such evil. John and Michaela McAreevy were brand-spanking newlyweds who had jetted off to a tropical paradise on the eastern African island of Mauritius to celebrate their special day. After a beautiful wedding, they flew out on their honeymoon to start the rest of their life together in luxurious style. However, the celebrations and happiness would soon turn to tragedy as the beautiful bride was killed less than 2 weeks after tying the knot on the happiest day of her life. Michaela was born on New Year's Eve of 1983 and was 27 years old at the time she married John. Her father was very well known back at home in Ireland as a historically successful Gaelic football coach. Despite this relationship with her father and Gaelic football, Michaela had been open and honest in public that due to her allegiances with her dad and the importance of football in her life, that any potential love interest would, in all reality, have to share a passion for the Gaelic sport. so it was no real surprise that the man she agreed to marry was the captain of his club, a respected Gaelic football player, and an accomplished accountant. For all intents and purposes, the couple seemed like a match made in heaven. And so on December 30th of 2010, just a day before her 27th birthday, John and Michaela were married at a beautiful ceremony in a small church in Tyrone, Northern Ireland. Friends and family described how they were madly in love with each other and shared an unbreakable bond. So off they flew to the island of Mauritius. They arrived at the Legends Hotel full of excitement and love. They had chosen that particular hotel because it had proved to be something of a popular hotspot amongst the Irish. On January 9th of 2011, security footage shows Michaela and John booking themselves into a couple of relaxing spa treatments. They were freshly married, enjoying their time together, and were intent on living the life of luxury and indulgence that they'd dreamed of when they booked the honeymoon. However, little could they have known that this special time together at the start of the rest of their life would only last another 24 hours before an unspeakable and devastating tragedy would unfold. The following day, on Monday, January 10th of 2011, in the morning, John had a golf lesson that was awarded as a part of the hotel package, while Michaela hung out and waited for him by the pool. They then went to one of the on-site restaurants for lunch before settling down for some afternoon tea to unwind. The newlyweds had received a box of luxury chocolates as part of their welcome package upon checking in. Michaela decided to pop back to the room to pick up the chocolates so they could enjoy them with their tea. Despite saying that she'd be right back, Michaela took longer than John expected, and as the minutes ticked by, he started to become concerned about her whereabouts. Given how close they were to their room, there was no reason why it should have taken so long. After waiting for more than 30 minutes, John started to feel like something must be wrong, and so he paid the bill at the restaurant and made his way back to the hotel room. Arriving back at the room, he realized that he'd left his key card by the swimming pool. Assuming that Michaela must be in the room, he knocked on the door for her to let him in. However, it appeared as though there was nobody actually in there. Despite the room being seemingly empty, John did think he could hear the faint sound of running water coming from inside. He was given a new card and escorted back to his room by a member of the hotel staff. But when he arrived back at the room, it immediately felt as though something wasn't right. He entered the room, only to find the running water noise to be increased upon his arrival. What he faced next is the stuff of nightmares, and the worst possible discovery he could possibly have been faced with. Michaela's lifeless body could be seen floating in the bathtub. It took officers over half an hour to arrive on the scene, and an additional 1 hour to cordon off the crime scene. In that time period, a number of significant mistakes were made that should never have happened. Dozens of people walked in and out of the hotel room, which was effectively a crime scene. Hotel staff, doctors, and even random guests that were passing by all entered the room at various times, subsequently contaminating and interfering with vital evidence. The most significant evidence was Michaela herself, and she was inexplicably moved from where she was in the bath out into the hall. John was initially considered to be a suspect, but was ultimately deemed not to have been involved. Within 24 hours of the discovery of Michaela's body, 3 hotel staff members had been arrested. The 3 staff members that were under investigation, Avinash Tribuhan, Sandeep Munya, and Raj Tikoy. All 3 were cleaners at the resort and had been using key cards to gain unlawful access to guests' apartments. After months of investigations and piecing together the evidence, the police believed they had a pretty good idea of what had happened. The key card surveillance software used for the room key cards suggested that somebody had gained access to the room with a keycard used to enter via the front door. It's thought that whoever had broken into the property planned to steal whatever they could find in the room, and this was supported by a fingerprint on the door to where the room safe was kept. It is believed that when Michaela then entered the room a couple of minutes later, the thief was startled by her unexpected return and attempted to hide in the bathroom, hoping that she wouldn't come in. Unfortunately for Michaela, she had no idea what was waiting for her on the other side of the bathroom door, and as she innocently entered the bathroom, she was attacked from behind by the intruding thief, who seemingly panicked at the whole situation. What started as a petty theft had taken a dramatic turn for the worse, and he then proceeded to strangle the beautiful 27-year-old. After he'd killed her, it's thought he then placed her in the bathtub and ran the water in an attempt to make it appear as though she had drowned. After this, the same keycard records show that the next entry into the room was when Mark returned from reception with the new card. A week after the heartbreaking murder, another 2 suspects were arrested. These were 26-year-old Dasan Narayanan and 39-year-old Sonarani Mangu. The case against Dasan was a complicated one that would ultimately be hard to validate. As a security guard in the hotel, it was his fingerprint that was found on the door of the safe inside the room. However, there was also witness evidence that proved Dasan was seen inside the room helping with the fallout of the horror that unfolded as people tried to figure out what had happened and what was going on. It stands to reason that hotel security would be in and around the scene afterward, and so the inevitable DNA evidence that was linked to him was no longer sufficient to pin him specifically to the crime. This, of course, ties into the problem with the failure to seal off the crime scene after Michaela was found. Sonarana Mangu was also a security guard who investigators initially thought was involved. It was believed that these 2 suspects, along with the original 3 that were arrested, were part of an organized theft ring at the hotel. They worked together to gain access to guests' rooms, steal any belongings, and then split the profits between the 5 of them. However, there was insufficient evidence for the investigators, and they subsequently had to drop any murder charges against Dasan and Sonarain. The cleaner Raj Tikoi was also cleared of the charges, but under one condition. He would have to testify against his cleaning colleagues Avinash and his supervisor Sandeep. The investigation and prosecution ended up being a long, drawn-out affair. The 2 remaining suspects, Avinash and Sandeep, waited 16 months before the trial for the murder of Michaela Makarivi to begin. The primary investigating team came under significant criticism for its handling of the case. Although Avinash did originally confess to the murder of the freshly married Michaela, the confession only came after allegedly being beaten into confessing by officers for 3 long days. Forensic DNA evaluations concluded that no physical DNA traces of 4 of the 5 suspects were ever found on the body of Michaela or at the crime scene. The single exclusion, of course, was Dasan, whose fingerprint DNA was confirmed on the door of the safe in the apartment, but was later discounted as incriminating as he had been in the room supporting John in the immediate aftermath of the fatal incident. Without conclusive and definitive DNA evidence, it was impossible to find anyone guilty of murder. A security camera clip that had somewhat conveniently been leaked to the press just a day before the trial showed John and Michaela arguing intensely at the hotel resort reception, planting the seed, of course, for a domestic dispute, and once again putting John back in the frame for what would occur. If the clip was confirmed as being footage of John and Michaela, then the entire case would have been up in smoke. However, the timing of the clip was 15 minutes after Michaela had already been tragically murdered, so there's no way it could have been them. It happened to be a cleverly placed piece of evidence put together by the defense team. It turned out that the clip in question was actually of 2 German guests stopping at the resort, so the judge threw the evidence out and asked it be discounted from the case. The defense angle continued to heavily lean into the theory that it was John who had murdered his own wife, but the reality of it was that this thread never made any sense right from the get-go. A number of witnesses, in addition to security camera footage, had John's whereabouts accounted for at all times. You can only imagine how difficult it must have been to not only experience the horrific murder of your brand new wife on your honeymoon, but then to be callously accused of being the one to kill her yourself. Not just privately, but in the media, in public, and in the courtroom. That has to be tough to take. But it wasn't just John who was targeted by the defense team. Even Michaela was scrutinized herself, with the defense suggesting that maybe the killing came as a result of a fantasy with a stranger that went wrong. This of a murdered woman on her honeymoon. As agreed previously, in order to gain full immunity, Raj Tikoi took to the stand as instructed. In his statement, he said that he had seen the cleaning trolley of Avinash outside the apartment and heard screams of pain coming from Michaela's room. He then witnessed Avinash and Sandeep come out of the room shortly after looking rather concerned and nervous. After confronting them, They threatened to kill him if he ever said anything to anyone. There was a lot riding on the case for the entire island of Mauritius, which so heavily relies on its tourism trade. Obviously, having a killer on the loose around its hotel resorts is hardly going to be great for business, so the defense went strongly on the suggestion of the heavily flawed investigation and the historically corrupt police force. They suggested that they had selected 2 poor local workers and sacrificed them as scapegoats in order to rid the country of an unsolved murder issue. Having failed to secure the crime scene after the murder, as well as being unable to collect any DNA evidence from the scene, there was very little for the prosecution to confidently claim. The most concrete confession had come from Avinash, but it's suspected that the confession was beaten out of him in a police force where this is historically known to have happened regularly. After what was hoped would be a short, swift trial, it took the jury a full 2 months to reach a verdict. In the end, they concluded that Avinash and Sandeep were not guilty of the murder of Michaela Makarivi. Inevitably, this was a devastating blow to John and Michaela's family, who were desperately seeking justice. John declared he would continue to fight forever to get justice for his beautiful bride. But despite being reopened on multiple occasions, we still have no definitive conclusion to this terribly sad case more than 10 years later.